Hello, my name is Maria Cornejo. It is a pleasure to be here to talk about the research, a study on the acquisitional of postverbal subjects in Spanish from an evolutionary and acquisitional perspective in corrective focus structures. I will introduce the topic and talk about the hypothesis. I will describe the methodology and explain the structure of the experimental study. And finally, I will show the results and outline the conclusions. So the aim of this study is to research the interaction between word order and information structure in Spanish. This study concerns the acquisition of postverbal subjects by L1 and L2 English speakers of Spanish from an experimental and descriptive perspective. As is known, the unmarked order in English, Italian, and Spanish is SVO. However, in Spanish and Italian, for example, the subject can be realized in postverbal position. So that's why we did this study, this research. This project stands on the statistical and descriptive analysis of the linguistic experimental test, the SMART test, and the online test. The general hypothesis is that the realization of postverbal subjects might be sensitive to specific focus types. So the research focused on studying the realization of subjects, specifically in postverbal position, in broad and narrow constructions from acquisitional and experimental perspective. For this reason, experimental tests have been carried out by children and adults, analyzing the results obtained following the appropriate statistical methods according to the design of each test and thus according to the type of answer required in each test, and conducting a comparative analysis on the acceptability of postverbal subjects by making use of the results obtained from the L1 and L2 speakers of Spanish, the adults, and determine where the differences found are significant. In any case, the comparative analysis of the results obtained from the L1 and L2 speakers of Spanish, the adults, is not explained in this presentation, okay? It is a descriptive analysis of results, though. Regarding the methodology, there are two experimental tests, as I said before. The SMART test intended to children to check and evaluate the evolution of the responses to the same stimulus in children. We use the control group of adults as a reference to create this test. And the analysis and description of data was carried out with the chi-square test. The online test intended to adults. In this case, we have two groups, the control group and the target group, to check whether the association between context and word order variation is part of the competence of an English learner of Spanish and whether the references found between L1 and L2 adults are statistically significant. An analysis and description of data was carried out with the ANOVA test. The SMART test was completed by 93 participants. Children were divided in two groups, a group from 4 to 6 years old and a group from 7 to 9 years old. The test was a one-to-one question-free answer test with the SMART characters intended to examine the syntax, discourse, properties of postverbal subjects in L1 children. The informants were students of a school in Seville. And regarding the methodology, children were presented a PowerPoint presentation like a movie, and they were asked to answer a question concerning either the subject or action at issue. The test was distributed in two different sessions, 2 weeks distance, because otherwise it was too long for children. They were presented, they were shown different scenes with the Smurfs characters, and here we have 3 examples. One for information focus, one for corrective, and one for broad focus. We're interested in the corrective focus example in this presentation. So children could see something like this. The image, the picture of Smartfert, and they would listen to the question, okay?
Los pitufos tienen que enviar una carta muy importante. La está escribiendo Papá Pitufo, ¿no?
Okay, so children could see and listen to the question, okay?
Los pitufos tienen que enviar una...
Okay, and they should answer the question, okay? It was a spontaneous answer. So children were assisted by 2 people in the classroom, and we had an answer sheet with possible options, and could select the one provided by the child or take note of different answers. Could be any type of answer, but we expected children to answer something like this, okay? No, la está escribiendo Pitufina, la carta. No, Pitufina está escribiendo la carta. No, está escribiendo la carta Pitufina. O no, la carta la está escribiendo Pitufina. There is not always an object, okay? Sometimes it is a different complement. And we had to take into account some assumptions for the analysis, since children do not provide standard answers, okay? So in relation to what I was saying before, the SVO category has been divided in null subject and over subjects. The variation in the selection of synonym verbs has not been considered. Cleft sentences have been included in a specific category, and only focus answers have been included in a separate category as well. The online test intended to adults was completed by the control group and the target group. This test consists of a series of sentences set in different contexts and a final part, generally a question, with 4 options proposing different word orders to complete the relevant micro-test. In this case, it's an online test, so it's a written test, okay? It's different from the one that we created for children. The informants in this case were Spanish native adults with similar features and ages from 18 to 60, and university students between 18 and 25 years old with advanced level of Spanish. The methodology in this case was different. The test was distributed online. The informant had access to a survey by clicking the link previously received. And for each option, the student or informant should provide a judgment on its acceptability along a Likert scale running from 0 to 4. All options are grammatical. The test is anonymous and it takes about 20 minutes. And it was this written test was the one taken as the model for the SMARTS test used for children. So we first created this one, and then we adapted it for children, and we created a different kind of test, okay, in which we expected a different kind of answer, as I said before. So the structure of the tests, in order to create them, okay, we took into considerations the influence of 2 factors, the focus type, as I said before, and also the verb type. So we use transitive, an accusative, and a negative verbs, okay? One of each type. Within transitive, 2 types, okay? One of each. Within accusative, 3 different types, and within negatives, 2. So we concentrated on 3 different types of POSI, as I said before. This is an example of each type in the same way that we saw the 3 different examples in the SMARTS test, okay? Although in this presentation, as I said before, only corrective focused results are shown, okay, later on. So one example of a sentence and a question for corrective focus is the following. Esta mañana había un gato en el jardín, pero ya no está. Estoy segura de que lo ha cogido esa niña que lo miraba tanto. Te equivocas. And 4 options to answer the questions were presented, okay, on a Likert scale, and the informant had to provide a judgment, okay, on each option. So they could see something like this. This is taken from the survey online, okay? So here they have the sentence, the situation, and well, they have la ha escrito Daniel, ¿verdad? And they should answer no and the different options, okay? And give a judgment on the acceptability for each option. So the analysis methods, as I said before, were different. So for the online test, we use the ANOVA test, since we use a Likert scale. And for the children, there was not Likert scale, but spontaneous answers. So we used a chi-square test, okay, because the type of answer is different. So the results regarding the answering strategies by children, we have the corrective focus, okay, results, and an evolution of answering strategies by age, taking into account the 3 types of FOGI, okay? But if we focus on corrective focus, the SVO strategy is largely used in all age group, although it decreases with age. OVS order becomes the preferred option in children from 7 to 10 years old. There is a progressive increase for VOS, but not very significant, and the VSO order is not an option in Spanish. As for the answering strategies by L1 speakers of Spanish, regarding corrective focus, the preferred options are SVO and OVS. The preference of OVS is influenced by the type of verb. The VOS order is the 3rd preferred option, depending on the verb type. And VSO order is the last option in all cases. Regarding the answering strategies by L2 speakers of Spanish, in the case of corrective focus, the acceptability of all orders is not influenced by the verb type. SVO is the most acceptable option in all cases, and there is no significant difference between the other 3 orders in transitive and negative verbs. However, in unaccusative verbs, there is no significant difference between VSO and VOS or OVS, while VOS and OVS show a significant difference compared to each other. So sorry, for some reason I'm not allowed to go to the next slide. So I will tell you the conclusions without showing you the slide, okay? To conclude, from an evolutionary perspective, there is an increase in the VS order, and on the other hand, a decrease in SVO. The use of VS strategy starts to emerge earlier. And from a second language acquisition perspective, the significant differences between L1 and L2 speakers of Spanish are relevant enough to carry out an experimental analysis to develop some didactic proposals from the classroom for the classroom in the future. That's what I would like to do. So thank you very much for listening, and sorry about the conclusions at the end. I don't know why I'm not allowed to go to the next slide. Have a nice day, and thank you again.